Hello, and welcome to the bonus topic for episode 21. We're here with Andrew Wise and Zach Roberts. If you paid for this on Patreon, thank you for your support. If you're watching this on free on YouTube, hey, just tell somebody about the show. I would really appreciate if you spread the word about Around the Lens and get us some more views and likes, and just open up the show to the more audience members. I appreciate that. All right, so our bonus topic this week is kind of something that Andrea touched on. And sort of, I'm sure we'll get lots of great information during her webinar on April 20th. But essentially, it's how do we price our work? So there's a great story in the Photo Brigade talking about, pricing for like a newspaper photo reprint. And, they were talking about what somebody would charge for a print. I know that you can sell your work on your website, and I think you've sold one photo, perhaps. I can't remember what you've said before.
Yeah, I never get any sales. Yeah, I don't really try too hard, so it's not a thing that I do. But yeah, about one.
And how about you, Andrea? Do you sell your work as straight photography work, or I mean, I know you work as a photo editor primarily, but have you ever sold your work?
I have, yeah, when I was a photojournalist, but that's not really what I'm doing these days as much.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you really want to be making, I mean, a big part of what I do at Viewfind is finding the right audiences for stories that come in. So we have contributors from around the world who are, for the most part, freelancers, although some of them are on staff, as long as, it depends on what their relationship is with their, with their employer, but they submit stories to us, and then we have a little over a dozen relationships with media outlets that do purchase work that is pre-existing work, and so as stories come in, we identify what would be a good outlet for that work, and then we proactively do pitch work. So I'm sort of selling work on that side, but for individual photographers, keywording your archives and making your archives searchable is really, really important. Using something like PhotoShelter is really valuable. Yeah, I mean, for selling your work, it's gonna, for the most part, it's gonna come down to somebody is looking for an image of someone or of something really specific, and they're searching for it, and then it's just a matter of whether your work comes up, whether they can find it, and then if they can find it, if it's good.
So if I want to sell my work on Viewfind, how does that work? Like, how if I create a story or something, how does Viewfind sell it for me, or how does that work with you guys? What percentage do I get of the cut, so to speak? Is that based on the photographer, or is that standard?
No, actually, so photographers get 70% of licensing fees, which is really pretty unusual nowadays. So the way that it works is that we only accept stories. We don't work on a single image basis, and we only accept journalistically sound work. So that's one of the big differences between our platform and some of the other, more single image, crowdsourcing based social platforms out there. Because we're really about visual journalism. So if you have a story that you've been working on, whether it's something that you're working on right now that you're trying to get out, or even if it's something like from your archives that still has relevance, whether it has relevance because it's just sort of an evergreen ongoing topic, or it's something that, April 26th is the 30th anniversary of Chernobyl, so like maybe you've done a project about Chernobyl that is now going to be relevant again just because of, ongoing news. So you can just go to viewfind.com and register to be a contributor on our site. And then you can just hit submit story, and then when you submit a story, you have 4 boxes to check off. The top 2 are mandatory, which you're checking off that you agree to the terms of use of our site, and then that you agree that your work adheres to the ethical principles, the ethical guidelines, which are really similar to the NPPA's guidelines, that you're not staging or setting stuff up, that you're not trying to mislead people with your work, that it's journalistically sound, made with integrity, and then you can opt in on ads and on licensing. So if you want us to try to license your work and we're able to find an outlet to buy the work, then you would get 70%. And if you want to opt in on ads, we would share ad revenue 50-50.
How about you, Zach? Where are you selling your work, or have you ever sold? When you sold your print, how much did you make on it?
Like prints directly through the website. I mean, I think usually it depends on what the end or the original question was. There's been a handful. Often I'll take photos of somebody at a rally or something like that, and and if they say, oh, how can I get a print of that, or how can I get a file of that, and I go, here's my card, I'll have it uploaded. You can either buy it through the site, and then it's usually set up to maybe be $25 or something like that. It's not, if they're buying their own photo, I don't
Just
have
like
it.
Personal use.
Yeah, personal, especially physical print. I mean, like, I can't imagine somebody's going to print something, have it mailed to themselves, scan it, and then use it for purposes. If they go through that process, you know what? Almost, it's more work than it deserves. But other than that, I've been working. I worked through my wire service Near Photo, and unfortunately they get 50-50 of that. But individual photos for rights, it really just depends on what the site is, and what the photo is, and a whole kind of different metric goes into my head, of how much I want to charge. And then, of course, sometimes if it's something like I've had Fox News try to buy a video clip of some protesting that I knew that only one other person has, then there's a bit of a FU rate that I add into it, because I know that they're going to defame the protesters with it while using the clip. So I add a little bit more money to it, just literally so that.
I don't really know how I feel about that. I mean, if you have ethical qualms about your work being used in a context where you think it's going to be disparaging the people in the work, then I would not let the work go.
Unfortunately, I usually try not to have that, but these days no one is buying anything, so my rent comes at some certain point.
Yeah, but I mean, your income doesn't need to be from.
And unfortunately, for a lot of protest work and stuff like that, it really comes down to that. Is that the few sites that are buying this sort of work, they don't pay anything whatsoever. And if they're going to buy it, if they want to pay for 30 seconds, they want to pay $300 or something like that for a clip, then I'll do it. Because I also know that I know that Getty would charge 3 times what I'm going to charge, even as a higher rate than I normally would. So I know that my rates are nowhere near what Getty or any other services like that are going to charge. So. Yeah.
I mean, you gotta make money, I guess, somehow. I mean,
I just don't think you can put a price on your integrity, though.
Oh well, unfortunately, I didn't think so either. But when camera gear goes bad and no one in the media is picking up or caring about these Black Lives Matter protests or paying any money for it. Then I don't know. The Guardian pays $1.15 for photos from my wire service. So if I have to make cash if I want to continue covering these things in some way, shape, and form, and that's sometimes the way I have to do it. So
I mean, I don't disagree with you, Zach. I mean, it's tough. I mean, really, when you put your work out there, especially if you're using, I think if you look at from a fair use perspective, I mean, people can manipulate what you put out there and use it to tell their story, especially if it's on like a wire service. Getty and AP, I doubt they're asking, the people who are buying their rights to use the picture, like, are you going to use this for propaganda? Or are you going to use this to tell the story it was meant to use? I mean, it's like,
that is
the
one
photo
thing
of the Muslim.
that is one thing that Viewfind is doing differently, because if we do find a buyer, we always bring that deal to the photographer and we say, X outlet wants to buy this work for X dollars. It's up to you. You can take it or leave it. And if you have editorial qualms about your work being affiliated with that outlet, then that is entirely your decision to walk away from it. You know, if the licensing fee isn't enough, I mean, yeah, but you know, it reminds me of Amy Vitale. I don't know, you guys, I'm sure you know Amy Vitale's work. She got an Alexia Foundation grant and was photographing in Guinea-Bissau, and she photographed a young girl at a school, and it's this very it's an uplifting moment. It's a young girl who's getting an education, and someone who is part of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign in Nigeria found the image, added a teardrop to the image, and then started circulating that image basically as propaganda for Bring Back Our Girls, which is totally the kind of cause that Amy would support, you know, trying to raise awareness about kidnapped Nigerian girls, but like that is using this girl's image, this little girl who's not even Nigerian and who is not a victim of sex trafficking, out of context. And I do think that part of being a photographer, part of being a journalist, is that it is your job to be protecting the images of the people who you're depicting.
Yeah, I mean, I never, Fox unfortunately didn't end up buying the clip. They bought somebody else's. I would have never even offered if I didn't know that somebody else had the clip as well, and that they were going to get this footage one way or the other, because, you know, Fox and a lot of other places don't necessarily deal with ethically getting their footage. They'll just pull it from YouTube, and all this stuff is up there at some point or another. They just wanted something that was a bit higher quality. I mean, unfortunately, like I've had wire photos of mine sold through multiple places. I mean, was it the governor of Oklahoma during the immigrant crisis? Was it 2 years ago now? She did an op-ed in some right-wing website, and they ended up buying, God only knows how much money it was for, probably like $5 or something like that, buying one of my photos of immigrant children, and her entire op-ed was basically saying, send them home, we don't need them here, and they used a big photo of mine. That's something I would have said, no way at all.
Why are you still with that wire service? I wouldn't syndicate your work through them.
I mean, that's unfortunately I've been through 3 different wire services, and they sell to everybody. So I don't know. If you got a recommendation of another wire service that doesn't sell to right-wing publications that I could sign on to, I would love to sign on to it. But
Viewfind.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Well, what were we talking about again?
Pricing.
Pricing. Yeah.
Pricing. Yeah. Pricing your prints. I only ever sold one print in my life. It was for $50, and it was actually at a art show, or it was like for it was like a photo art show, you know. So it was hung up in a gallery, and it didn't win anything, but it sold. So that was winning. Anyways, that covered the cost of the frame and the printing about. But that was my first ever sale of a photograph, so I was really happy about that. And since then, I haven't sold a darn thing. Now, I did work for an agency, and I did sell my work through there and make 50% profit, or whatever, 50% off of whatever it sold for. So that was fun, selling your work directly like that. And then beyond that, I've been published in places where, you know, I never received a dime for the work that was photographed, you know, published. But I'm kind of in a, you know, I'm somewhat lucky in that I don't have to do the work of a photojournalist to make my living, but, you know, again, it's something where I can see, you know, it's tough. You know, you got to hustle, you got to work really hard, you got to get your stuff out there, and I mean, you know, get it out, see as many people as possible. And I mean, I see where you're coming from, Zach. I mean, you gotta sell the work to sell it, and I see where you're coming from too, Andrea. You know, do you control who's actually buying the work? And it's tough. It's tough. It's not easy to be a working photojournalist in this day and age, or a visual journalist, and try and sell your work to anybody.
If what you have to do in order to preserve the integrity of your work is you know, get a part-time job doing something unrelated, just to finance producing the work that you really care about, that's really important, you know, there are a lot of ways to make money. And I know that when I was working I was freelancing and interning, and only for a very short amount of time, because it's really, really tough work. But I had a whole lot of ego wrapped up in the idea, and pride wrapped up in the idea that, like, I was more legitimate as a photographer because photography was my sole source of income, and that's not what makes you, you know, a photographer. That's not what makes your work meaningful. Like, what makes the work meaningful and important is, you know, the work. And so whatever you have to do to make the work be what it needs to be, you know, everything should be in service of the work.
Zach, any thoughts on that?
No, I've been there. I've got I take other jobs outside of photography, and while, you know, I was covering, you know, most of the Occupy movement, I also worked at B&H Photo Video full time, and spent my nights there and did that. So I certainly do it, and I have a second job, at least a second job that barely pays the bills as well. So believe me, I know how having to do it, but at the end of the day, if as long as it's not something completely ethically terrible, then I'm gonna sell the photos there. So
if the KKK comes to you and says, Zach, we love that photograph you shot of the black protester, we want to use it in this rally we're doing, we will pay you $500 for it, you're gonna be like, not the KKK, not you guys.
No amount of money. I mean, there's absolute lines. I mean, like I said, Fox News is gonna just pull a clip from one of the previous protests and use that otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, the real issue here is just that as photojournalism, which I think is a really incredibly important role in society and informing the public, as photojournalism becomes a less and less financially accessible career path for the professionals in it, you get a narrowing of the perspective that is represented in the media. And so if the only voices that are represented in the media are voices of people who are of privilege enough to be self-financing their work, then you're not going to be having voices that are representative of the public consuming that media. And that's really where the issue comes up for me about why it's so important for journalism to be financially sustainable and to be finding models to sustain it.
I think Viewfind is one of those potential models. You know, I think that's what you guys strive to do, right?
That's the idea. Yep, that's the idea.
Okay, great.
Definitely.
Well, again, I want to thank you, Andrea, again, for hanging out with us for this bonus topic, and Zach, putting up with everything, you know, not everything, with your temperature, your sickness.
Yeah, feel better.
Go get some rest. Cover all that fun stuff going on tomorrow. I'm sure there'll be fun stuff after the primaries. Yeah. But that's it for the bonus topic. Again, follow us on everything. Go to AroundTheLens.com and really support the show. Appreciate it. If you're supporting already, keep on doing it. All right, and we're out.